Hey, we have another woman today I want to talk about. And quite honestly, I just found out about this woman about a month ago. I was at an intercession meeting for the Gulf Coast, and the person who I respect deeply, who talks a lot about awakening and revival, Rick Curry, was teaching about Elder Lucy Smith, and he taught a little bit about her. And I thought, wow, that is fascinating. And I knew I was going to be doing Great Women of Our Faith in the month of May. So when I got home, I did a little bit more research on her. So today we're going to be talking about Elder Lucy Smith. She was born in 1874, and she was born Lucinda Madden. And she was also known as Lucy Turner Smith, or as she became to know as she progressed in her mission as Elder Lucy Smith. She founded and pastored the All Nations Pentecostal Church, the first Black megachurch in Chicago. It is estimated that she witnessed 200,000 healings and miracles. Be yourself was Elder Lucy Smith's greatest encouragement. Grammar was not important to her, and she never tried to be oracle. She was not into this being a perfect, poetical, perfectly delivered speech. It was common for her to speak softly and to move around while she preached and ministered. But she prayed for the sick, all diseases and all illnesses would be cured. And in man's eyes, she lacked what she lacked, but in God's power really made up in her life. And I love this about Elder Lucy Smith, because when I was in ministry school, some of you have heard me talk about this, that um, I went to school to heal, to learn, to follow a call of God that He put on my life in when I was 17. And I had instead gotten married and lots of reasons. And, here I was 20 years later in ministry school because I didn't know what to do when my life fell apart, right? So the woman that I was taking counsel with and being mentored by said to me, "What were you going to do before you got married?" And I said, "Well, I felt like God called me to Bible school." And she said, "Well, why don't you go?" And I thought, I, do you not know I'm a woman? Number one. Number two, I'm divorced. And she just smiled at me and she said, "What if you just went there and just soaked it in and healed and sought the Lord?" And I thought, well, I started praying about it, and the Lord said, "Yeah, go." And so I went. And so this so much she reminds me of my ministerial credentials, right? In the fact that I am not grammarly correct, right? I'm not a great orator. I'm not interested in being the perfect looking woman. I'm not interested in a lot of fluff, right? And so this calls out to me with who she was. And when I was in ministry school, back to that story, I remember telling the Lord when He began to deal with me about answering the call that He had given me so many years ago. God's giftings and callings are irrevocable. Certainly, we leave the path, we do a detour, right, at times, but He still is wooing us to step back into what He has for us. And I told him he didn't know that I was a woman, apparently, and he didn't know that I was divorced. And, so many denominations, even then and still today, are so looked down. They'll tell you on their papers that they're for women preachers, but there's not really that many who actually celebrate them and embrace them, and put them on equal, right? And so, as I was telling the Lord about that, I asked about a specific denomination, and I told him that's where I was going to go and be ordained. And he asked me why. And I said, well, because they can open a lot of doors for me. And the Lord said to me, "Oh, you want them to open doors for you?" And I said, that's how the Lord talks to me. He just asks me questions, right? And I was like, "No, sir, no, that's not who I want to open doors. I choose to do what you would have for me." And so I began to tell him about, "You do know that I'm a woman and that I'm divorced, and I'm not going to be just accepted. Just it's not something that's going to happen." And the Lord said to me, "You get the goods, and no one will care that you're female and that you've been divorced many years ago." And I have found that to be true. Just like Elder Lucy Smith, she walked around when she ministered. I do that. I'm always very much moving. Um, I'm not a great orator, right? But I believe in God's power. And that's what God's promise to me was, if I would do what he called me to do, and if I would seek him, he would give me the goods, and that those I ministered to, I would have what they needed. And so I love that about Elder Lucy Smith. So she believed that all illnesses could be cured. And in man's eyes, she lacked everything, but God's power more than made up. So Elder Lucy Smith was born in January 14th, 1875 in Woodstock, Georgia. And her mother raised her and five siblings alone in a one-room log cabin. When she was 12, she gave her life to the Lord. And at 13, she began school for the first time. In 1910, after a marriage and 9 children, hear me, 9 children, she moved to Chicago after being abandoned by her husband. I remember her mother was a single mom, and now she's a single mom again. And a couple of years after moving to the city, Elder Lucy joined Stone Church, a predominantly Caucasian congregation. A number of the most well-known divine healing ministers at the time regularly ministered there, including William Seymour, Smith Wigglesworth, John G. Lake, Mariah Woodworth Etter, as well as others. And she received her personal calling into the ministry of healing in the midst of that atmosphere of miracles. It was Lucy who began a one-room prayer meeting in her own home. It reminds me of Susanna Wesley, right? Yeah, ladies, we can use our homes. We can use what we have in our hands, like Moses. What do you have in your hand? God said. And he said, it's a staff. And we're only asked to use what we have. And so Lucy began this one-room prayer meeting in her own home with only 2 people. And it didn't take long for the meeting to grow, as rapidly were being healed and baptized in the Holy Spirit during the meeting. Within 3 years, they relocated to a bigger facility where they remained there for 3 more years. Within 10 years, she built a $65,000 church, the equivalent of $1 million today. And by then, it was the 1930s, and there were more than 5,000 members of her church. And according to her, the growth of the church is attributed to healing services that were provided. There was nothing short of phenomena that the phenomenal healing service at All Nations Pentecostal Church happened on Sunday. And a healing service would be held 3 times a week by Elder Lucy Smith. Each week, the deaf, the blind, the crippled, the lame, the stroke victims, and those who were suffering from goiters and cancers were healed. Many crutches and canes from people who had been healed of the diseases and ailments were displayed in the basement of the church as a decoration. And as Lucy traveled across the state of Illinois and abroad using God's healing power, as she saw several hundreds of people healed and saved as a result. A great deal of her popularity was due to the fact that she was able to attract people from all classes and all colors. It was God who came to Lucy and told her to broadcast the services on the radio so everyone could hear them. In 1933, this broadcast became known as the Glorious Church of the Air radio program on the airwaves. It was the first, hear me now, us ladies, come on now, we can do it. The first live service to ever be broadcast from a Black church. In response to her prayers, people all over the country would write and tell her they had been healed. The radio program also helped fund the tremendous charity work the church did during the Great Depression. They fed thousands of people and supplied food and clothing to Black families. Lucy Smith, a simple yielded vessel, is an example of the extraordinary exploits that God can accomplish through his creation, through us ladies. Her goal was not to be anything other than who she was. And it was clear to her that what she was called to do, and she stayed true to it. On June 18th, 1952, Lucy died with over 60,000 people showing their respect. The funeral was the largest in Chicago's history. And a famous quote, "We must cherish one another, watch over one another, comfort one another, and gain instruction that we may all sit down together in heaven." Isn't that a great quote? Great quote. And I believe, don't quote me on this, I'll have to look it up, but I think her radio broadcast went on for 100 years. I think it may have been folded into another radio program. but her legacy stands on. So just because someone else hasn't done it doesn't mean that we can or we can't, right? Just because someone else hasn't done it doesn't mean that it's not God calling you to do it. Because so many times we look through the history of Christianity and it was started by a woman. I hope this is encouraging you, and I will see you tomorrow on Great Women of Our Faith who helped shape Christianity for us. Have a fabulous day.